perfect! This is the one!
Oh, hell no, man. What the man?
Do you have the right stuff to cut it down?
Yes.
Ah, perfect. Nothing screams non-religious in origin holiday quite like a plastic tree stacked on top of 40 original Xbox games. Santa! Is that you? Christmas was last year!
Then why are you wearing a Christmas hat?
Oh, Jesus! And look at that massive sack!
Well, you got me there.
So can I sit on your lap until you want it for Christmas?
I'm just gonna use the bathroom first.
I want a Sega Genesis with all the fixes! What? Get out of here! I want a Sega CD with Sonic the Hedgehog CD, a Sega 32X with Sonic the Hedgehog 32X, a power base adapter with Sonic the Hedgehog power base adapter, a Sega channel with Sonic the Hedgehog channel. So I want Sonic the Hedgehog 1, Sonic the Hedgehog 2, I want Sonic the Hedgehog 3, Sonic the Hedgehog and Knuckle, Sonic the Hedgehog Spinball, and Sonic the Hedgehog Blast.
Those games are terrible.
All Sonic games are terrible.
Don't you want a real game like Altered Beast, Shadow of the Beast, Roar of the Beast, Beast Wrestler?
What are you, a furry?
I've got Alex, kid.
Nah, his only good game is Shinobi.
How about something for that Sega CD you got? I think I got Dragon's Lair in here somewhere.
Dragon D's nuts.
I got Wild Woody.
Do you have Snatcher in here, maybe?
Like I could afford Snatcher.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
So what do you want?
I want to join the NRA.
Let's talk about guns. Not that, something that a me could handle. When video games finally came to the home, it was all dedicated consoles, meaning that the doohickey you bought could only play a few set games that were built into it. Some of these had multiple games that came with their own gun controllers separate from the console themselves. One that I want to bring up so that you can see how whack some of this stuff looked from back in the day is the Coleco Telstar Arcade. It's shaped like a triangle and comes with 3 sets of controls to play 3 different types of games across 4 different cartridges. You have the standard stuff, the racing wheel, whoa there, and to take cover, there's a weapon! The Magnavox Odyssey is often quoted as being the first home video game console. These guys don't really matter when you consider that you could be playing 1, 3, or 6. You go on and have fun with your little gay Station 5. I'll be enjoying a nice session of cartridge 10. The Odyssey was bundled with 12 games here in the US and came with TV overlays that you'd use to add flair to your gaming experience. By flair, I mean to make them more comprehensible, as otherwise it's just dots on a screen. It was the 70s. It was either this or you talk about women's rights. The other games for the console were sold separately, 4 of which came with the purchase of a particularly silly peripheral.
Like this?
If you didn't already know who made this, you'll be shocked to find out that this is from the houses of Nintendo. I feel like if I tried to innocently point this at someone, I'd be shot by the police, and it wouldn't be because of my sexuality for once.
Come on, man.
Aside from this blatant weapon, there weren't really any other guns to look at in the first generation. As for the second generation of video games, that's when dedicated consoles began to slowly fade out and we saw more real home gaming. None of those had their own gun peripherals though, so we'll skip ahead to when we saw a gun competition. A gun petition, if you will. While the video game crash of 1983 took place in the United States, courtesy of a market with no checks, regulations, or care for the average consumer, instead focusing more on money, Nintendo had created their own video game console in Japan called the Famicom. It was later brought over to the US in 1985 as the NES, and was a huge help in bringing the video game market back up to snuff. Packed in with it were Mario Bros. And Duck Hunt, 2 games of variety that showcased what the NES was capable of. It also came with a controller for Mario and one of the most recognizable pieces of video game hardware for Duck Hunt, the NES Zapper. This right here is what sold this console. Mario who? What the hell is that? We're killing ducks.
Why do you care so much about this stuff? You don't even have a CRT.
The zapper, and most light guns for that matter, work like this. When you press the trigger, the screen flashes black and the targets turn into white blocks. If the zapper detects that you aimed at a white block on the screen, it will then kill the fucking duck on command. If not, you're a loser. Duck Hunt is the epitome of light gun games, period. Nothing but you, your dog, an ice cold beer, and a field ahead of you with ducks waiting to be blown into smithereens. This right here is the life.
You know what? You try.
Oh, cool. Thanks.
Look out, he's got
There are some other games that use the zapper though. Some better ones are like Gumshoe, Hogan's Alley, and the one I have here, Wild Gunman. This shit's fucking awesome. Now, to be fair, this is about as good as it gets, essentially just arcade-style games. There were 18 total that used the zapper on the NES, and most of the rest of the games failed pretty bad. I'm imagining two kids walking home from school and one says, "Hey, wanna go play Baby Boomer on my NES?" And then the other kid fucking kills him. On that line of bad, we have The Adventures of Bayou Billy. This game was pushed by Konami to be a top seller. It was all over Nintendo Power. He had an Archie comic series, and of course, he was in Captain N, the Game Master.
Don't rush it, kid. You still gotta learn about this here bayou.
This game forces you to swap between 3 different genres, which is quite innovative for its time. I'd say that it was cool if it was, but this game fucking reeks. It bombed really hard, which is a damn shame. I think it would have been really funny to see Konami try to sell us on another Bayou Billy adventure, to Bayou to Billy.
Really? It wasn't that bad.
You're right. Can you hold this?
Yeah.
He's gotta go!
Sega had been in the competition for a little bit, but wasn't seeing a whole lot of success. Their first attempt into breaking into the reborn United States video game market was the Master System in 1986, what I've dubbed as being the lightest video game console that I have ever held. It's almost lighter than a Nintendo DS Lite. You could throw this thing a mile over the county line, man. Look at this controller, too. Holy fuck, this is the dinkiest thing I have ever held. The D-pad isn't even a D-pad, it's a fucking O-pad. It's a square pad. Sorry, that's enough body shaming. Let's talk about pack-ins. The NES came with Mario Bros. And Duck Hunt, a mascot platformer and a fantasy. As I said, the Master System came with a controller, but it also came with a gun, the Light Phaser. I found this one at a bookstore in Atlanta earlier this year, and it was very much worth the $15. So what games did they pack in to use with these? Hang On and Safari Hunt. Hang On is a fine enough romp, and Safari Hunt isn't unfun, but there's a reason that the Master System didn't catch on quite like the NES did. Well, there's a lot of reasons. Reason number 1, the Master System was late to the party. It came to the US a full year after the NES had, so a lot of the market that came after the crash was swept up pretty fast by Mario, Duck Hunt, and other early games of the console. Reason number 2, the Master System's pack-ins were lacking personality. Neither Hang On nor Safari Hunt have the same level of charm that Super Mario Bros. Or Duck Hunt have. There's no mascot, there's nothing really sticking in your head. Instead, it's just a motorcycle and racism. Reason number 3, the Master System had awful branding and marketing. Look at these boxes. Look at this box art. Why does the console look like this? This is a fairly complicated mess. Compare it to the NES, which was made to look like the rest of your gizmos at the time. A VHS player and a cassette player would look fairly normal on either side of this babe, not so much around this thing. It looks like a bomb. Let's look at some other games, like Gangster Town. Not to bring it up again, but my god, this is such awful box art. This is the baby-faceiest badass I've ever seen. The story is that gangsters have taken over town, and it's your job as one individual single person to shoot all of them. Hey, you can even shoot their ghosts passing on into heaven, presumably preventing them from the sweet afterlife and forcing them down into the pits of hell, as if they weren't dead enough.
Fuck, I was doing good too. Never say die.
Wanted is also a pretty fun time, but it's more of the same but in a different setting. It does shift a bit as you move along, and it looks great. I'm a really big fan of how you can ride on a horse in some of this. The Master System had better graphics than the NES. Put the gun down. It had better graphics, but what it lacked more than anything else were the big hitting titles that drew people in. People came to the NES for stuff like Castlevania, Metroid, Mario, the games that got kids excited and the games that got kids talking about them at school. They came for quality arcade ports and arcade-style games. They did not come to the Master System for Alex fucking Kidd and the giant weird foot ninja. What about this screams high tech?
Well, that looks high tech.
Before any of my 2.6% Brazilian demographic starts ripping my head off, I should mention that the Master System only flopped here in the US. It did fairly well in pretty much every other country, especially Latin America, where they still make them regularly. I like the Master System and its light gun offerings a smidge more than the NES. I think that they were tied pretty evenly on that front. And hey, we're done with the third generation of light guns and we can all go home now. Oh, what's that? I'm supposed to talk about Atari again? Oh man, as if you could even stop me. The Atari XE gaming system, shortened to XEGS and personally pronounced as the ZEGS, is technically Atari's third home console. I say technically because it's also a home computer. It came packed in with this, the XG-1 gun. Now, I don't own a ZEGS, but I do own a different console that it works for. See, quite a few consoles of the time used this exact port for controllers back in the day. The Sega Master System, the Sega Genesis, the Atari 2600, which I somehow don't own. Let me add one in post. Rumor has it that you can actually short one of these out by using a button on the Genesis controller that the console doesn't know about. Oh, and the port is also found on this. Right here is my Atari 7800, recently modded to have AV out so we can actually play it. The NES had 18 zapper compatible games in the US. The Master System had 9 light phaser compatible games in the US. The 7800 got 4 games total for this thing. Though technically it's actually 5, as the 2600 game was released in 1990 that was also compatible. Remember, the 7800 was the first ever backwards compatible console, meaning that we actually can play it just fine. This is Sentinel, released here in the US on the 2600 13 years after the 2600 had been out. When it was released, the 7800, 2 generations of consoles later, had been out for 4 years. It was put on the 7800, but we never got it here in the States for some reason. This is a pretty straightforward light gun game. Since it's the one and only of its kind on the 2600, I have to give it some credit for being the best light gun game of the console. However, it's also the worst light gun game on the console, and I hate it. The next 3 are all quite easy to find, not only in box, which is odd for games that came in cardboard, but brand new as well. Conditions may vary. I paid under $30 for each of these. Barnyard Blaster, Crossbow, and Meltdown, all released between 1988 and 1990. I'm under the impression that because the 7800 didn't come with a gun, that no one knew where to get one. You're telling me that I would need to buy a ZEGS and a 7800 to play Crossbow? Barnyard Blaster moves slow, plays slow, and the art is all fucky-wucky. Why are we killing these birds? What did this mouse do? Damn tax evader. I'm a huge fan of the score screen having Old MacDonald over it. Genuinely unintentional humor.
That's really bad.
Crossbow looks like a 2600 game, and all you do is make sure that your group doesn't die by shooting things that are coming down at them. This is a game that screams why the 7800 didn't do well. It could easily run on a 2600. There was little to no improvement across 3 consoles, and the games that did look good usually never came up because they were just arcade ports that were better on other consoles. Well, that, and they were also homebrew. I'll own a copy of Ricky and Vicky someday. Meltdown is borderline impossible to decipher. Allow me to act like I understand what's going on here for a second. 2 purple dudes are running laps in opposite directions on the same rectangular metal tube. Every time they touch, they get a feeling, and every time they kiss, they swear they could fly. They send little sparks into the circle of the, volcano, I guess? Whenever the sparks hit the edge of the metal tube, it constricts a little bit, and the field becomes a little bit smaller. Random shit will also start appearing to ruin the game, like F-Circle and Tic-Tac. If the little sparks, F-Circle, or Tic-Tac hit the pink gloopy part of this, quote, reactor, then they cause it to fall apart. The game ends when all of the pink gloop is gone and the reactor explodes. Best of the bunch. The final light gun game for the 7800 is the most expensive, coming in at just over $100. Alien Brigade. Now, I'm going to show you the art for this cartridge. If you are easily scared, look away now. This thing is really freaky and I love it for being unique in that regard. I can't think of too many games that have art that makes me as uncomfortable as this. Super bust-a-move? So it'll go back out when I have it on my shelf. If he went to spell out Brigade 2, I don't know what I would have been capable of. Overall, this game is pretty sweet. I'm a big fan of killing the military, so it gets 2 big thumbs up from me. Can I get arrested for saying that? You know, these aren't really doing it for me. Do you have anything else?
Will these work?
Look out!
When Nintendo was upgrading from the NES, they didn't really have to try hard to remain on top, considering that they had swept up the competition and threw them into the trash. Or did they? The Sega Genesis had come out a couple years before the SNES and hadn't really eaten into the NES's sales a whole lot, despite being 16-bit compared to the NES's 8-bit. It came packed in with Altered Beast, a game that was, fine? It's okay in the arcades, but it's a slog on Genesis. It's not a system seller, and the Genesis' sales were showing that. In mid-1991, Sonic the Hedgehog had released, and quickly, haha speed pun, became a system seller. The SNES released later that year, and just after that, Sega started packing Sonic the Hedgehog in with the Genesis, which caused it to skyrocket in sales. These two were fairly neck and neck throughout the generation despite the outcome in the end, and there were no third parties anywhere near them. The TurboGrafx-16 was a pretty big deal in Japan, known there as the PC Engine, but it didn't sell well here in the States, and that's only because it didn't come with a light gun. The other bits of competition that did have light guns were, what? The Philips CDI with their Peacemaker? Christ, that is one hell of a name for a gun. Just a few months after the SNES release, we got the Super Scope. It came with the game Super Scope 6, a compilation cartridge that shows off the capabilities of the Super Scope. It had a pretty neat variety of games, and by that I mean it had Tetris, Tetris, and Moles. Blastrous A is a sideways Tetris where you shoot parts of the pieces to help them fit better in your stack. Blastrous B is kind of like columns with diagonal and colored matching rather than the Tetris usual of line. 4 lines. L block. Square.
There is no place for a square, my lord.
Mole Patrol is what I actually want from a light gun game. Kill these little things that you can generously call moles, but realistically call little space freaks. This is great. The other half of the cartridge is more of what you'd expect from one of these types of things as well. They're called Intercept, Engage, and Confront. 3 great activities for you and the ex-wife. Interception is like a first-person shooter shoot 'em up, but you're flying sideways alongside the rockets instead of at them. Mario, what are you doing here?
You think Mario's a war criminal?
Oh yeah, sure.
Engage is the same deal, but you're heading for the rockets instead of by their side. I like the supply plane that shits in your face. I am to assume that this is what engaging is all about. Finally, Confront, where you're shooting alien ships coming at you while you're on their home planet. Perfect activities for you and the former missus. Let's quickly talk about how this thing works. First of all, batteries. It's hard to find one of these that works nowadays because of this, as people would just leave the batteries in the scope and then forget about it, and oops, corrosion 20 years later. I bought one that didn't work on eBay, for example, and the corrosion inside was really bad. Shout out to the people of Tekken Gamer in Grove City, Ohio for fixing this for me, as I wouldn't be able to do this right now if they hadn't.
Come on out to Tekken Gamer. Mel's helped me out quite a bit here. We've been helping each other. But if you mention Mel, I'll give you a 5 to 10% discount.
It comes with a sensor that goes into the second controller port. The Super Scope is basically an infrared laser, and using the scanning of CRTs in the SNES, it reads the screen to see where you're aiming. It then takes a single pixel of where it thinks it landed, and if it's a place that the game recognizes as a shootable area, then bam, you've killed a fucking mole. Great job, Miyamoto. He really loves his moles. Another game that I have that's compatible for this is Yoshi's Safari. This is the only canonical appearance of Mario with a gun, I think. But remember, Mario will never start shooting hookers.
And of course, Mario will never start shooting hookers.
Yoshi talks, and he teaches you how to shoot people as you go on your way to save Princess Peach's friends in Jewelry Land. Instead of how Mario normally travels through worlds, he rides on Yoshi and does drive-bys on innocent Koopas. He may not start shooting hookers, but he will murder bystanders who aren't even hindering his journey to Jewelry Land. At the end of every level, Yoshi looks back at you like, hey, nice job killing that guy. And then you get a Chaos Emerald.
So Yoshi's a war criminal, right?
Oh, for sure. He came out of the fucking egg wanting civilian blood.
The Super Scope is one of the sickest looking peripherals for a video game console that I've ever seen. While its pack-in lacks variety and it as a whole lacked games to make it a worthwhile purchase, I like it. Sega's response was to make an admittedly cooler yet more useless looking gun. The only thing that makes it even more badass is what it's called. The Super Scope is a nice name. It has a cool vibe and it means business. Now, how about the fucking Sega Genesis Miniser? It works the same as the Super Scope and its logo looks like that of a metal band on Adderall. This right here is a gun that means more than business. It means business. Just like the Super Scope, it came packed in with its own cartridge of 6 games, so let's compare and contrast. First is Pest Control. Keep the bugs off of your pizza. I don't like this one very much. Space Station Defender is like Mole Patrol, but not as fun. If I can't kill a mole, then what's the point? Ready Aim Tomatoes has an Earl cameo from Toe Jam and Earl. In fact, all the assets here are pulled directly from Toe Jam and Earl. It's the best thing on this cartridge so far, and it's the only one worth playing. I love whacking my ball, so I hope that whack ball is fun. I am not having as much fun as I could be if I was just whacking my ball in real life right now. Let's hope that these last two are good. The shooting in Frontline is slow and delayed as the bullets have to travel on the screen rather than how instant shots are with every other light gun game. Even when they're not instant, they travel much faster than this. Contrary to what you might think it's based on by its name, Rockman Zone has nothing to do with Mega Man and instead is a shooting gallery on wheels type game, which we already have one of on this cartridge. It's nothing special. They didn't even make a unique track of music for it. In fact, only one of these got unique music at all, and it was all just pre-existing Toe Jam and Earl music. And I think that's even lazier than using the exact same menu song that they did for the other 5 games. This cartridge screams lazy. I think it was put best by some of my friends that I let play it. This shit feels like if We Play was boring and had no personality. It's all just tech demos, but without any sauce. Maybe the rest of the games that use this behemoth of a controller will be better. Can you guess how many games it's compatible with? Take your time. I'll wait. Maybe 5? 10 games? Would you be surprised if I told you that there were 20 Miniser compatible games? I would be too, because that was a lie. There's only one other Genesis game that uses the Miniser. Hello, Terminator 2. It works with 6 Sega CD games though, so maybe there'll be something good in there. I own 2 of them here, Mad Dog McCree and Corpse Killer. Let's start here. I love a good spaghetti western so long as I don't spill any of the sauce. I'd like to start this by saying that I bought a copy of Mad Dog McCree only for it to not work. The manual's pages were stuck together and they were impossible to separate, like that one Princess Leia meme. The seller explained it was because of soda, but if I'm gonna be honest, it smelled a little bit like mold and there was mud on the inside of the case, so I'm going to assume it was left at the beach. On top of that, the previous owner had resurfaced the disc, causing it to not work. Here's my warning to any of you that are planning to collect retro games. Do not resurface early CD games like this or the Saturn, for example. You're sending them straight to a death sentence as it exposes the data on the underside. You'd be doing a better service to the disc if you snapped it in half. For example, the disc I had always stopped right at the point where you would start shooting.
There's a beat that someone can make here.
Even then, the gun icon is supposed to follow your moves with the Miniser, but it never did. So the resurfacing erased the game's ability to register a gun in general.
I think it broke.
Anyways, sorry about the PSA, let's get back into Mad Dog McCree. The man in the American Laser Games logo looks like Hard Rock Nick.
That's where I get my dick sucked, ass eaten out, balls tugged on one by one.
This game is an interactive FMV, which a lot of Sega CD games were. The special part of Mad Dog is that it was the first ever FMV light gun game in arcades. This is a big deal. It might be the first of its kind, but that does not change the fact that it looks and sounds like ass on the Sega CD. The enemies are all filmed either killing you or dying, so there's a lot of cuts where they took 2 takes to ensure that they had footage for both outcomes. It's quite innovative, but I don't think that this is the right game to be showing it off, as it sucks. This game can be completed in 30 minutes if you know what you're doing, but I don't think anyone knows what they're doing when they pop this in.
I'll take a drink for every shot you take.
Corpse Killer is in the same vein, but with a lot more content and in better quality visually. For some reason, this game requires not just the Sega CD, but also the Sega 32X, meaning that in order to play it, you need to have a Sega Genesis, a Sega CD, a Sega 32X, 3 wall outlets that are far apart from each other as these AC adapters are huge, and then a 4th wall outlet for your TV, a gun peripheral, and patience. Also a lot of money. These AC adapters could kill someone. They are not just huge, they're heavy. It's another interactive FMV, but this time the enemies are all added in post, so it's even harder to take this game seriously compared to Mad Dog McCree. It's not very good, but raising the electric bill by 10-fold to experience, this, maybe it's worth it for the amusingly awful time you'll have. Make it into a drinking game, why not?
Stop shooting, please. Think of my liver.
You don't have a liver.
The Genesis Miniser didn't do all too well, and for obvious reasons. They didn't combat the Super Scope well, and it feels like they stopped caring really early on. Both the Super Nintendo and the Sega Genesis had Lethal Enforcer from Konami, a game that came with a gun named the Justifier, hilarious name, and including the Sega CD games, it has more of a library than the Miniser does. I think it's very obvious that Sega just did not care about the Miniser. Proof that they didn't give any shits? The SNES lets you kill your lemmings in Lemmings 2 as sort of an Easter egg. Does the Genesis let you do that? Hell no! It's pretty clear that despite neither gun having a huge leap on the other, the SNES takes the cake here by a long shot. In case you don't believe that I'm right, how about I show you the SNES M16, released exclusively within the United States to train the military on how to kill people. Yes, this is real, and no, I do not have one, and no, I do not know how to find one. I love the United States military. Please don't arrest me. I'm sorry I said that I love killing you. Late edition, newsflash.
Oh my god! I can't believe this.
Hello everyone, my name is Mel Gun Art. I'm 1 month into working on this video. It is currently New Year's Eve, and I found something cool. This right here is a game gun made by American Laser Games for use with all of their games on the Sega CD. See? It says it right there. Right there. You see it right there? I found this at my local game store for $20, and whoo boy, it is not worth that much. Wowza. Anyways, this thing is pretty nifty, but if I have to be honest, it doesn't really improve the gameplay of Mad Dog McCree very much. The Minister was big and weird for Mad Dog, so it was kind of like a distraction. Oh, I'm holding this giant fucking gun, and it's like, oh god, it's so weird, and there's a game in front of me, bah, bah, bah. This gun does not take my attention away, and I'm just reminded that Mad Dog sucks. Anyways, sorry that this Christmas special is so late. Let's move forward. The 5th generation of consoles brought us some greats, like, what the fuck? Oh, hey, I know you. The 3DO was the big new competitor in town, and this sold great for a console that was far too overpriced and had little to no good exclusives. Just when they thought they had custody of Gex, he ran away from home and joined the rest of the competition. They did have a light gun, though. Hello, $350 controller for the 3DO that I'm not buying. It worked with so few games that you could count them on one hand. Crime Patrol, Who Shot Johnny Rock, and look, Corpse Killer is back. And so is his awkward brother, Mad Dog McCree, who was now on his 3rd console. 4 if you, for some reason, think that the PC is a viable way to play games. What a slut. I guess the Amiga CD32 also had a gun called the Trojan Phaser. I wonder if there's a connection. This thing could surely keep it from getting pregnant, that's for sure. Hold on now, you look familiar. Hey, what? In terms of the rest of the competition, it was about the same as before. Nintendo bailed on making a light gun for the Nintendo 64. Apparently there were third-party ones in the pipes, but not enough games were being developed to support them, so we never got one. However, everyone else did get the memo. The first gun from this generation is the Sega Saturn's arcade gun. The Sega Saturn was put out while the Genesis was still selling and being supported. The most recent defibrillation to ensure that the Genesis's heart monitor was still beeping was the 32X. My lovely, ugly, mushroom-shaped child baby had come out just 6 months before the Saturn, was barely ever supported, and was abandoned as fast as possible. They hurt you, my sweet summer child. We here in the States got about 10 games that worked with this. One of them being motherfucking Corpse Killer. Get out of here! This was the first home console port of House of the Dead, and also where Kojima got on more of his bullshit after Snatcher on the Sega CD.
Wait. There's Kojima, look.
Hello, Police Nuts. The arcade gun came bundled with one of the best games of the console, Virtua Cop. Like a fair few games in this video, this is an arcade game that was brought to the home. You play as part of the 40%, known as cops, shooting bad guys. I'm a huge fan of the fact that the bad guy's evil corporation is called Evil. It's really nothing super extraordinary on paper, but it's well executed and it's super fun to mess around with. In short, one of your coworkers is killed for knowing too much, so you have to go and take his place and end the reign of evil. Like I said, while this game isn't necessarily special in its idea, it shines in being one hell of a fucking fun game. It also makes me want to be a cop, but then I remember statistics, something 40% of cops, and then I put the controller down and thank as many gods as I can think of for not making me racist in sight and blue in blood.
Hey, in that game, you're the cop, right?
Oh, well, that's a relief.
Look out, he's got a gun!
Before anyone asks, yes, I obviously own more games that work with this gun, like Bug. Okay, so maybe this doesn't work with that. But you know what does? World Series Baseball 2. You know, I really thought that one would work. Daytona USA. Daytona USA Championship Edition. Daytona USA not for resale. Okay, so I may have lied, but in my defense, these games are hellishly expensive. It's impossible to afford collecting Sega Saturn games without going completely homeless. The new kid on the block, PlayStation, had their own light gun, made by Namco, called the Guncon. They released it with a fair few games for this peripheral, and by that I mean holy shit! There's actually a variety of games to talk about. Vampire Knight, Extreme Ghostbusters, Judge Dredd, Resident Evil, Dino Stalker. Here I have the only 3 that matter. No, not those. That's a video for another day. These here are the Point Blank series, originally known in the arcades as Gun Bullet. Warning, never point the guncon at anyone at any time. Check. Do not repaint any part of the guncon. Bright colors have been added for your safety. If I didn't spend 2 times price charting, I'd consider breaking this rule. Do not use the guncon outside or away from your video game system. Hello, public park. If the guncon is mistaken for a real weapon, you could be hurt. Pinned against the wall by a police officer as we speak, Namco. All 3 games came bundled with light guns. Sorry, I couldn't find the second one with it, so just imagine it's there. Actually, I'll do you one better. I'll attempt to edit it in post. Pretty snazzy edit, right? I'm getting good at this. These games are loaded with light gun / puzzle mini games, and my god are they hard to put down. I don't think showing gameplay fully conveys just how fun these games are to mess with. I'd compare it to WarioWare if Wario were given a gun and he were living at 2 times speed. Not for sale in California. I could review all 3 of them, but you kind of know what you're getting into with a series this simple in its premise. Simple in concept isn't bad though, especially when you have the personality and creativity dials turned so far to the right that they're broken. Despite the same idea being used 3 times, it's never stale. They even have a 4th lesser known entry on the DS simply called Point Blank, and it's just as good, but they didn't make a light gun for this thing. Probably because it would be really humiliating to point a gun at this dinky little screen in public. It would also be dangerous to have a gun in public. I remember that from the big box. What really ticks me off is that Point Blank is on that really long list of PlayStation games that were neglected after they found their demographic with the more hardcore adult male audience that liked Call of Duty and Madden NFL 04. Winner of the 2004 Spike Game Awards. Yes, that's real, by the way.
The winner for the game of the year, Madden 2004 EA Sports.
It's sad to see a graveyard like this where stuff with personality and charm gets ignored. I know I'm not the first person to say it, but I could really go for another Parappa, another Ape Escape, or fuck it, another Point Blank.
You know, 2 of those are an Astrobot.
Astrobot. Yes, I know about Astrobot. I think this is my favorite of the light guns thus far. It has a large variety of games it works with, and a lot of those games are good quality. It's easy to use and fun to mess with. The guncon is the light gun that consoles should strive to be from here on. It's such a good controller that I bet they could do it twice and no one would get tired. Haha. Right. Welcome to the 6th generation of gaming, folks. Here we have Inky, Blinky, Pinky, and Clyde. This is the generation where the smaller companies trying to make their way into the competition started to disappear. Light guns oddly had a lot going on this time around compared to last gen. Nintendo had continued their hunger strike on light guns, refusing to make one for the GameCube. Some may say that this is the reason it failed, and not because the PlayStation 2 was the man that every straight guy feared his wife was sleeping with, because she is. I think Luigi's Mansion would have benefited significantly from being able to shoot the ghosts instead of just sucking them off. This right here is the guncon 2, made for the PlayStation 2. It's compatible with a lot less games compared to the guncon 1, but it has a fairly nice sized lineup of quality titles. All 3 of the Point Blank games were ported to the PlayStation 2 alongside the PlayStation 1 port of Time Crisis 1 as the Gunvari Collection, released only in Japan because the rest of the world did something wrong and deserved to suffer. Virtual Cop is here as well. What a nice reunion. I only have 2 games for this thing, being the one that I got it packed in with, Time Crisis 3 and Starsky and Hutch. I would own the other Time Crisis games, but I already spent far too much money on this video, so enjoy the 3rd entry instead of all of them. Unlike Time Crisis 1 and 2, which were fairly true to their arcade versions, Time Crisis 3's console port actually had some unique features compared to it that the arcade counterpart didn't have. I, as a very real Time Crisis fan for years, maybe even decades, know very little about this, but do enjoy it regardless. This game is fun, but I think I need to go for a drive after drinking earlier. Starsky and Hutch is a PS2 game tie-in for the 2004 movie called Starsky and Hutch, featuring YML models, and wow. In order to prepare for this, I watched the movie that this game is based on and not the TV show from the late 70s that the movie is based on, because that doesn't exist. This game allows you to use the guncon and a PlayStation 2 steering wheel. The best way to play this game is with 2 people, as single player does not get across just how fun this is. Player 1 is driving and player 2 is shooting, though if you're lonely, maybe you could be doing both on your own. This game may not be perfect, but these ratings are far too low. I think a lot of the hate is because people are playing it wrong. Single player is whatever, but no gun, no steering wheel, it's kind of required to have 2 people and 2 peripherals that it didn't come bundled with to get the full experience. It's kind of like Mario Kart Double Dash, but maybe Mario does start shooting hookers. This is one of my favorite uses of a light gun. Before this, it was all just Tetris blocks and killing innocent civilians. This game has you as a cop, but it's cool this time because it's a sleazy buddy cop thing, which I'm a sucker for. By the way, have you ever heard this game's soundtrack? It may very well be one of the best composed things for the PS2 ever, and I mean that with my whole chest. It's so good, and yet you would never guess who composed it. Yeah, that guy, known for this. And this. And, I don't know, this. I love the guncon and its older brother. These are the sickest guns to date. I can't believe that they have such little utility. So few people know about the guncon 1 and even fewer people know about the guncon 2. You know, I think that they should bring these back. If anything, wouldn't it be cool if they made it a third time?
The most advanced guncon ever.
Oh, come on now. You're just showing off at this point. So that was the big guy. What about the rest of the crowd? Nintendo might have avoided it, but Sega didn't. Well, kinda. See, for the Dreamcast in the US, we only got 5 games compatible with a light gun, and yet Sega never released the official one here, instead opting to release it exclusively in PAL and Asian territories. We Americans got this freak from Mad Catz. One of my favorite things that I found while researching for this video is an article on the Old School Game Vault called The 5 Most Underrated Sega Dreamcast Light Gun Games. I wonder which ones made the list. Despite the lack of actual games to mess with, there weren't just these 2 guns. There were 11 others from different companies for 5 games. I guess I should also take a brief moment to say that I'm choosing to ignore most third-party peripherals in this video. I'm doing my best to stick with the most interesting entries, and that does mean that I have to ignore the Pelican Stinger. Sorry, buddy.
I have failed you.
You know what would make this really funny? If I told you that one of the light gun compatible games for the Dreamcast was just a Sega Saturn game from the previous generation. Hey, remember Virtua Cop? Its sequel, Virtua Cop 2, is also on the Saturn and is not only compatible with the arcade gun, but it came bundled with it. It's also on the Dreamcast and compatible with these. This generation's new kid was in fact not a new kid, but really more one of those movies where they cast 30-year-olds to play teenagers in high school.
How do you do, fellow kids?
What?
Microsoft had hopped onto the game console race with the Xbox, using Dwayne Johnson to convince children to fall into the trap that is, wow, this thing is heavy. Have you ever tried to lift an original Xbox before? Good God, you could kill a man with this. God, please help me. Microsoft never really made an official light gun for this thing. Instead, there were a few third-party peripherals. I'm choosing to ignore this one because I really want to talk about this one, the Xbox Silent Scope Light Rifle. It came with Silent Scope complete. No, it didn't. I'm a fool. I ordered one online. I'm sorry I almost lied to you. This is a compilation of 4 on-rail shooters. I really like the paper that they included. It basically tells you that they fucked up and that they hope that you wouldn't notice. Is this number still being used?
Thank you for calling PvP Customer Experience. Our lines are temporarily closed.
I'm sure they'll get back to me later. Funnily enough, the original Silent Scope also came out on the Dreamcast, and yet it has 0 light gun compatibility. At this point, it just seems like I'm taking shots.
Oh, come on, man. A 1? We already did that joke.
At the Dreamcast wherever I can, and to be fair, I totally am since we had a messy breakup and I don't really want to talk about it right now. The Silent Scope games are fine enough, but I feel like they might not have been the right thing to pack in with the gun, especially since they were all available on the PS2 separately. They're fun and they show off what the gun can do, but at this point, you really should have gone the full mile, especially considering the gamer demographic switch up into more action-ish games. Pew pew shooty shooty shit, you know? Something this simple doesn't really sell me over on the big bulky controller that doesn't work with very many games.
Now, you know what would have sold me over is being able to play Virtua Cop 3 an arcade exclusive that never received a console port. Well, folks, we have received some unfortunate news. A second plane has struck the North Tower.
They canceled not just a port of Virtua Cop 3, but they canceled a much more official and less goofy fuck-off looking gun for the original Xbox? Do they not realize how, I don't know, freaking sweet this could have been? If the costs of the gun were why they canned the project entirely, then why not just make more games that would work with the gun? I see the huge missed opportunity that is making the original Call of Duty trilogy into games with optional light gun compatibility. This is why they sold worse than the PlayStation 2. Fuck you, John Xbox. Aside from the Silent Scope franchise, this also works with House of the Dead 3, and by proxy of it being included with House of the Dead 3, House of the Dead 2 is also compatible. The final game it works with is... Hey, wait a minute. I know you. I already discussed you. Go away. If I want to talk about you again, then I have to watch the whole movie again.
So Starsky and Hutch, right?
In the end, this generation clearly favored the console that had a sick-ass light gun and not the losers who avoided it. As I already briefly showed off, the PlayStation 3 had the guncon 3 for Time Crisis 3 and Deadstorm Pirates, but I couldn't get a hold of any of those. Now you might be curious about the 7th generation, but that's where I have some bad news. I feel like I may have to address the elephant in the room. I'm sorry to tell you this, but your child has died. The 7th generation of consoles is the one that I've been dreading to look at. It's where the bit wars truly ceased to exist and the console wars began. Things were becoming higher quality both in terms of visuals and playability. Alongside this, flat-screen LCD TVs had begun springing up in the market. They had been around for decades before, but the difference that caused them to sell this time was because they were becoming more affordable to produce and therefore more affordable to buy. CRTs are big and bulky and break your bones. They take up way too much space and are a hassle to move around. A flat-screen TV, one of those newfangled doohickeys, were flat, and also they wouldn't break a bone, maybe stub a toe if you tried hard enough. With everyone gradually switching over to the skinny, high-def 16:9 resolutions, this also meant that the typical light gun would fade out. This new technology didn't work the way that these fat, sexy beasts did. They no longer have the same method of creating pictures, and there's now a delay instead of the instant flash of a classic CRT. Light guns are outright impossible to play on a TV like this. Now, it should be stated that this console generation was on the edge of the end of CRTs. All three major consoles released this time around still had support for 4x3, and also so did my little friend here. You'll get him next time, Tiger. However, not one of these came with a light gun. Choosing to ignore the guncon 3, the closest we saw was the various hunting games. My personal favorite example here is the Top Shot Elite, which was released on all three consoles. For the Wii, it was as simple as using the Wiimote instead of a bit of plastic, as it was kind of like a light gun in itself, detecting where it was via the sensor bar. The Xbox 360 and PlayStation Triple didn't have the same motion controls, so this game instead came with a sensor bar to make up for that. The Wii had completely replaced the idea of light guns, at least for Nintendo, because it came built as a light gun, really. The Wiimote could fit into all sorts of silly looking plastic, like this orange one, this green one, or this white one, or hell, even these epic Western ones that I found at a local antique shop. You could also use it in a lightsaber. The 360 had the Kinect, but we don't really talk about that, and the PlayStation 3 had the PlayStation Move, which did have some gun capabilities, including its own plastic shell. It even came in US Army branding. I'd served crack before I served this country, but it's nice to see that indoctrination was alive and well around this time. As gaming moved forward, light guns stayed behind as a silly one-trick pony. PlayStation VR had its own little gun controller, the Wii U was gonna have a gun peripheral to hold the gamepad, and the Nintendo Switch has loads of plastic garbage that you can put your Joy-Cons in to make you feel like you're really hunting down a pirate chicken, but it's really just not the same. I think the signs of light guns dying off were there from the start. From the very beginning, these guns have been nothing but a novelty with little to no utility, both from third-party publishers and the console manufacturers themselves. You're telling me that Sega really cared about the Menacer when it never released outside of North America and they only released, count 'em, 2 games on their big seller? No, they hated the Menacer and wanted it out of the house for being 32 years old, not having a job, and doing nothing but smoking weed and jerking off in the basement.
Hey, you know what? Yeah, you're kind of right. The light gun's disappearing. It is kind of sad. I got something that might cheer you up, though.
Ooh, a present?
It's a warrant for my arrest?
Well, you did say you wanted to kill the military.
Shit. Fuck, right.
You also joked about 9/11.
You know what they say. Never forget.
Oh, God, please, officer! Please let me go!
Stop resisting! Stop resisting!
Oh, God, please, officer, you have no clue. I have a wife and 3 kids, and they all hate each other, and if I'm put away in jail, they're all gonna kill each other, and it's gonna be so bad for the family, officer, please. Please, officer, don't shoot me. Please, I'm white, I promise.
You sure about that?